Ugly Duckling. On a farm long ago, a mama duck sat on her nest. "How long must I wait for my babies to hatch?" she said. "I have to sit here all alone, and no one comes to visit me." But what could she do? A mama duck must keep her eggs warm till they hatch. At last, the eggs began to crack. One by one, yellow ducklings stepped out of their shells. They shook their wings and said, "Quack, quack." "Look at all of you," said Mama Duck with joy. "You are all so cute." "Quack, quack," they said. Mama Duck said, "Come and line up. We will go down to the lake for your very first swim." She counted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. "Oh dear," she said, "I should have 6 ducklings." But one large egg was still in the nest. "Well," said Mama Duck, "it looks like that big egg will take more time." So she had to go sit on her nest again and wait some more. The next day, the big egg started to hatch. Out came a baby boy bird. But if one may say so, it was an odd-looking thing. This bird was much bigger than others. He was not yellow at all. He was dark grey from his head to his feet. And he walked with a funny wobble. One of the yellow ducklings pointed. "What is that? He cannot be one of us." "I have never seen such an ugly duckling," said another. "How can you say such a thing?" said Mama Duck in a stern voice. "You are only 1 day old. Your brother hatched from the very same nest as you did. Now line up. We will go to the lake for your very first swim." Yet the other ducklings quacked, "Ugly, ugly, ugly." The ugly duckling did not know why the other ducklings were yelling at him. He took the last spot in the line. Each yellow duck jumped in the river and swam behind Mama Duck. When it was his turn, the ugly duckling jumped in and started to paddle too. "At least he can swim," Mama Duck said to himself. When they left the water and started to play, the ugly duckling tried to play with his brothers and sisters too. They yelled, "Go away. We will not play with you. You are ugly, and you walk weird too." When Mama Duck was close by, she would not let them talk in this way. "Be nice," she would scold. But she was not always close by. One day, one of the yellow ducklings said to the ugly duckling, "You know what? You would do us a big favour if you just went away from here." All of them started to quack, "Get out, get out, get out." "Why won't they let me stay here?" said the ugly duckling to himself. He hung his head down low. "Ah, they are right. I should go." That night, the ugly duckling flew over the farmyard fence. He flew till he landed on the other side of the lake. There he met 2 grown-up ducks. "Can I please stay here for a while?" said the ugly duckling. "I have nowhere else to be." "What do we care?" said one of the ducks. "Just don't get in our way." Woof, woof. Suddenly a big hungry dog came tearing by, chasing the 2 ducks. They quickly flew up in the air, and their feathers fell down on the ground. The poor ugly duckling froze in fear. The dog sniffed and sniffed at the ugly duckling, then turned away. "I am too ugly even for the big hungry dog to want," said the ugly duckling with his head hung low. The sky turned dark. Crack! A bolt of lightning. Then came a big storm, with heavy rains pouring down from the sky. In just moments, the ugly duckling was soaked through and through. Then a cold wind started to blow. "Bit," he said with both wings held close to his chest. "If only there was a place I could get dry." All at once, a tiny light blinked far off in the woods. Could it be someone's hut? He flew to the door. "Quack," said the ugly duckling. The door of the hut creaked open. "What is all this noise?" said an old woman, looking right and left. Her eyes were not that good. Then she looked down. "Ah, look at that. It's a duck." She picked up the ugly duckling and dropped him inside her hut. "You can stay here, but only if you lay eggs," she said. A tomcat and hen crept up to the ugly duckling. "Who do you think you are, coming in here and taking up room by the fire?" said the tomcat. "Squawk," said the hen. "I do not need anyone else in this hut laying eggs." "Do not worry about that," said the ugly duckling. "I am a boy duck." "Then why are you still here?" said the tomcat. "Did you not hear what the old woman said?" "Get out of here, pretender," clucked the hen. "Get out, get out," hissed the tomcat. The door was still a bit open, so our poor ugly duckling slipped out the door and back into the storm. "No one ever wants me," said the ugly duckling with a tear in his eye. The storm ended. Soon he found a new lake. Looking into the water, the ugly duckling saw the reflection of a flock of large white birds flying. He looked overhead and could not believe what he saw. There, above him, were the most beautiful birds he had ever seen. Their long white bodies and slender necks seemed to just glide through the sky. He watched until the very last bird had winged its way out of view. He stayed at that lake all by himself, and time passed. The leaves of the trees turned deep red and gold, and then the leaves fell to the ground. Winter came, setting a blanket of white snow all over. The cold wind and the dark clouds made the ugly duckling feel even more sad. He had to go into the cold lake to fish, but it was getting harder to swim. The lake was turning to ice. One day, it was all he could do was to paddle the water to keep it from freezing around him and trapping him in the lake. "I am so tired," he said, paddling with all his might. The ice got thicker and drew closer to him. In a moment, two giant hands swept him up. "You poor thing," said a farmer. He held the ugly duckling close to his thick wool jacket and took the bird to his home. Never was a warm fireplace more welcome. For the rest of the winter, the farmer cared for the ugly duckling. Then spring came. Tips of green covered the trees. Short, bright flowers popped up from the ground. "It is time for you to go to the lake to swim again, as you were born to do," said the farmer. He took the duckling back to the lake where he had found him and set him with care on the water. "Gosh, I feel strong," said the young bird, flapping his wings. "Why, I never felt as strong as I do right now." He heard quiet splashing sounds behind him and turned around. A flock of those same beautiful birds he had seen in the sky before landed behind him on the water. "Do not worry," he said to them, holding out one wing. "I will go now. I will not make trouble for you." A big fat tear rolled down his cheek. He turned to go away. When he opened his eyes, he saw a reflection in the water of one of those beautiful white birds. Why was it so close to him? He jumped back, and the reflection jumped back too. "What is this?" he said. He stretched his neck, and the reflection of the beautiful bird stretched its neck too. "Why are you going so soon?" said one of the beautiful birds. "Stay here, with us," said another. "We'll be great friends." Then the bird who used to be the ugly duckling knew what had happened. He was no longer an ugly grey bird that wobbled when it walked. At one moment, all the swans flapped their wings and took off into the sky. "Come with us," one called back. "Take the lead." So he flapped his wings fast and took his place in front of the whole flock. All his new friends flapped their wings behind him. "Say," he said, gliding and dipping through the sky as he sped on. "Who's an ugly duckling now? Surely not I." Moral of the story. The story tells us to treat people the same way we want to be treated. Maybe you were not perfect yesterday, but maybe today you'll be perfect, like the ugly duckling. 3 Little Pigs. Once upon a time, there lived an old mother pig. She had 3 little pigs. One day she decided to send them on their way to lead their lives on their own. "Go and seek your own destiny and fortune," the mother said, and the little pigs went their ways. The first pig was very lazy. "I'll build my house with straws," he decided as he chose the easy way. He got the straw from a farmer and started building. The second pig said, "I will make my house with sticks." He got the sticks from a woodcutter and began building. The third pig was laborious and intelligent. "I will make my house using bricks," he said, and got the materials from a builder pushing a cart of bricks. "Your materials seem weak, and your house won't be strong," said the little pig to his brothers, as he was concerned that their construction would not be sturdy enough. He said, "Listen, brothers, we should make a strong house, which can save us from any danger." The other 2 pigs said, "You do it your way, and and we will make our houses our way. Anyways, those bricks look very heavy. So much labor and so much work, not for us. You continue. They ignored his advice and constructed their houses the way they wanted. Soon, all three pigs built their houses and were pleased about it. After some time, a wolf passed the lane of these pigs' houses. He saw the house made up of straws and a pig playing nearby. The wolf decided to him. The moment the pig saw the wolf, he ran inside the house in fear. Then, the wolf knocked on the door and said, Little pig, won't you let me in? But the pig refused and replied, No, not by the hair on my chinny chin chin. Then the wolf grinned and said, Then I'll huff, and I'll puff, and I'll blow your house in. He did what he said, and he blew the house away. Seeing this, the first pig ran towards the second pig's house to hide. The wolf followed him along and found the second pig's house. He knocked on the door again and said, Little pigs, won't you let me in? After seeing the scary teeth of the wolf, both the pigs replied, No, not by the hair on our chinny chin chin. Then again, the wolf laughed in satire and said, Then I'll huff, and I'll puff, and I'll blow your house in. And he did just that. Realizing what was happening, both the pigs escaped to the third pig's house. The wolf followed them on, reached the third pig house. Now, the wolf knocked on the door again and said, Little pigs, let me in. But the frightened pigs answered back, No, not by the hair on our chinny chin chin. Then the wolf laughed cunningly and threatened, Then I'll huff, and I'll puff, and I'll blow your house in. The big bad wolf tried to bring the house down and huff and puff again and again, but it was of no use. The frustrated wolf attempted to make a forceful entry from the chimney, but the intelligent third pig boiled a large pot of water and placed it below the chimney. The wolf fell inside the pot, hurt himself, and ran away in a jiffy. The three pigs were overjoyed. The other two pigs praised the third pig for his hard work, practicality and intelligence. Moral of the story: perseverance and hard work pay off in the end. The story highlights the importance of intelligent and practical hard work in life, as it will definitely pay off in the coming years. The first two pigs were reluctant to do the hard work and chose an easy way to build their houses, and these houses could protect them in the face of danger. But the third pig, who didn't shy away from the hard work, made a solid house that could protect him and his brothers in the end. Little Red Riding Hood. Once upon a time, there lived the prettiest little girl ever seen. Her mother made her a little red hood, and everybody called her by the same name, Little Red Riding Hood. One day her mother asked her to go to her grandmother, Go my girl, and see how your dear grandmother is doing, for I hear she has been very ill. Little Red Riding Hood set out immediately for her grandmother's place. While going to her grandmother's place, Little Red Riding Hood passed through the wood, where she met a cunning wolf who asked her where she was going. I am going to see my grandmother, said Little Red Riding Hood. Does she live far off? Asked the wolf. It is beyond that mill you see over there, answered the girl. Not long before, the sly wolf arrived at the door of Little Red Riding Hood's grandmother. The wolf knocked at the door. Knock, knock, knock. Who's there? Asked the grandmother. Your favorite grandchild, Little Red Riding Hood, replied the wolf using a fake voice. The grandmother said, Pull the string, my dear, and the latch will go up. The wolf did what she was told, pulled the string and opened the door. The wolf, without wasting any time, fell upon the good old grandmother and ate her up in a moment. The wolf then shut the door and got into the grandmother's bed, expecting the girl. Little Red Riding Hood came some time afterwards and knocked on her grandmother's door. Knock, knock, knock. Who's there? Asked the wolf, faking the grandmother's voice. It is your favorite grandchild, Little Red Riding Hood, answered the Little Red Riding Hood. The wolf cried out what the old woman had said to her, Pull the string, and the latch will go up. Little Red Riding Hood did the same, pulled the string, and the door opened. She went inside and saw her grandmother. "Grandmother, what big arms you have," said the Little Red Riding Hood. "All the better to hug you with, my little girl," answered the wolf in a fake voice. "Grandmother, what big ears you have," she said. "All the better to hear you with, my dear," answered the wolf again using a fake voice. "Grandmother, what big eyes you have," said the Little Red Riding Hood. "All the better to see you with, my sweet child," replied the wolf. "Grandmother, what big teeth you have got," said the Little Red Riding Hood. "All the better to eat you up with," the cunning wolf replied, and jumped on top of poor Little Red Riding Hood and ate her up. After the wolf had finished eating, he climbed back into the grandmother's bed and fell asleep, snoring very loudly. A huntsman was passing by and heard the snoring. He thought it was strange for an old woman to snore this loudly, so he decided to take a look. He stepped inside the house and saw a wolf lying in bed. "He has eaten the old woman, but perhaps she still can be saved," thought the huntsman, and he took a pair of scissors and cut open the wolf's belly. He saw a red hood shining through. A little girl jumped out of the wolf's belly and cried, "Oh, I was so frightened. It was so dark inside that wolf's body." Then the old woman came out alive as well. The three of them were happy. The old woman ate the cake and drank the wine that her granddaughter had brought. The Little Red Riding Hood thought to herself, "As long as I live, I will never trust a stranger." Moral of the story. The moral of the story, Little Red Riding Hood, is that we should never trust strangers. Even a very friendly stranger may have bad intentions. The sweet little girl, Little Red Riding Hood, finds herself in danger because she talks to the sly wolf and naively points out the direction of her grandmother's house. This ultimately would have ended with the wolf eating the grandmother and Little Red Riding Hood if the huntsman would not come on time and saved them. Cinderella. In former times, a rich man and his wife were the parents of a beautiful little daughter. But before she had arrived at womanhood, her dear mother fell sick and died to the grief of her husband and daughter. After a time, the little girl's father married another lady. Now this lady was proud and haughty, and had two grown-up daughters as disagreeable as herself. She could not endure her stepdaughter, and she gave her the most degrading occupations, and compelled her to wash the dishes and clean the stairs. When the poor girl had finished her work, she used to sit in the chimney corner amongst the cinders, which made her sisters give her the name of Cinderella. However, in her shabby clothes, Cinderella was 10 times handsomer than her sisters. It happened that the king's son sent invitations to a ball, which was to last 2 nights, and to which all the great people of the land were invited, the 2 sisters among the rest. This delighted them very much. They sent to engage the services of the most fashionable hairdresser, but they also called Cinderella to their aid, for she had very good taste, and she offered, in the most amiable manner, to arrange their heads herself. Whilst so occupied, the eldest said, "Cinderella, would you like to go to the ball?" "Alas," said she, "you are ridiculing me. I am not likely to go to the ball." "You are right," replied the sister. "People would be amused to see a Cinderella there." At length the long-wished-for evening arrived, and these proud misses stepped into their carriage and drove away to the palace. Cinderella looked after the coach as far as she could see, and then returned to the kitchen in tears, where, for the first time, she bewailed her hard and cruel lot, little dreaming that a kind fairy was at the same moment watching over her. She continued sobbing in the chimney corner until a rap at the door aroused her, and she got up to see what had caused it. She saw a beautiful woman who asked her, "Hey, dearie me, what are all these tears about, my child?" And then Cinderella told her of all her griefs, how her sisters had gone to the ball, and how she should like to have gone also. "But you shall go," exclaimed her visitor. "Dry up your tears, because I am your godmother and I can help you." The fairy took Cinderella by the hand, and said, "Now, my dear, go into the garden, and fetch me a pumpkin." Cinderella brought her immediately the best she found. Her godmother took the pumpkin and hollowed it out, leaving only the rind. She then struck it with her wand, and the pumpkin was immediately changed into a beautiful gilt coach. She next sent Cinderella for the mouse trap, wherein were found 6 mice alive. She directed Cinderella to raise the door of the trap, and as each mouse came out she struck it with her wand, and it was immediately changed into a beautiful horse, so that she had now 6 splendid greys for her gilt coach. The fairy was perplexed how to find a coachman, but Cinderella said, "I will go and see if there is a rat in the rat trap. If there is, he will make a capital coachman." Cinderella brought the rat trap, in which there were 3 large rats. The fairy selected one, and, having touched it, it was changed into a coachman. Then she touched Cinderella with her magic wand, and her clothes were instantly changed into a most magnificent ball dress. The fairy now took from her pocket a beautiful pair of elastic glass slippers, which she caused Cinderella to put on. And when she had thus completed her work, and Cinderella stood before her, the fairy was much pleased, and desired her to get into the carriage with all expedition, as the ball had already commenced. Her godmother, however, before she took leave, strictly charged her on no account whatever to stay at the ball after the clock had struck the hour of midnight, and then added that if she stopped but a single moment beyond that time her fine coach would again become a gourd, her horses mice, and her old clothes resume their former appearance. The arrival of so splendid an equipage as Cinderella's could not fail to attract general notice at the palace gates, and as it drove up to the marble portico the servants, in great numbers, came out to see it. The king's son, to whom it was announced that an unknown princess had arrived, hastened to receive her. He handed her out of the carriage, and led her to the ballroom. Immediately she entered the dancing ceased, and the violins stopped playing. So much was everyone struck with the extreme beauty of the unknown princess, and the only sound heard was that of admiration. The king's son conducted her to the most distinguished place, and invited her to dance. She danced with such grace that everybody was in raptures with her. When Cinderella saw that it wanted but a quarter of an hour of midnight, she left as quickly as possible. Soon, the 2 sisters knocked at the door, and Cinderella went to open it for them. "Oh, how late you are in coming home," said Cinderella, rubbing her eyes, as if just awakened. "If you had been at the ball," said one of the sisters, "you would not have been tired. For there was the most beautiful princess that ever was seen, who paid us much attention, and gave us oranges and citrons." Cinderella could scarcely contain herself for joy. She asked the name of the princess, but they said it was not known, and that the king's son was therefore much distressed, and would give anything he had to know who she could be. The next evening the sisters again went to the ball, and Cinderella soon made her appearance, more magnificently dressed than before. The king's son was constantly at her side, saying the most agreeable things, so that Cinderella did not notice how the time passed, and had quite forgotten her godmother's words. She was startled by the first stroke of midnight. She rose very hastily, and fled as lightly as a fawn, the prince following, though he could not overtake her. In her flight she let one of her glass slippers fall, which the prince picked up with the greatest care. Cinderella arrived at home out of breath, without carriage or servants, in her shabby clothes, and had nothing remaining of all her former magnificence except one of her little glass slippers. Cinderella, who was looking at them, and now recognized her slipper, said, laughingly, "Let me see if it will fit me." The sisters immediately began to laugh, and to ridicule her. But the gentleman who had been appointed to try on the slipper, having looked attentively at Cinderella, and finding her very pretty, said she was quite right in her request, for he was ordered to try it on to everybody. He desired her to sit down, and at once found that the slipper would go on her foot, without any trouble, and, indeed, fitted her like wax. The astonishment of the sisters was very great, but still greater when Cinderella drew from her pocket the fellow slipper, and, to the great delight of the gentleman, placed it upon her other foot. Her godmother now made her appearance, and, having touched Cinderella with her wand, she made her look even more magnificent than on either of the former occasions. The sisters now recognized in Cinderella the beautiful person they had seen at the ball, and threw themselves at her feet, to implore forgiveness for all the ill treatment they had shown her. Cinderella raised them up, and, embracing them, said she forgave them. She told them she had never forgotten the last words of her mother on her deathbed: "My child, always be good, and bear with patience everything that occurs to you. Then, whatever toils and troubles you may suffer during life, happiness will be your lot in the end." Cinderella was taken to the palace, dressed in all her splendor. The prince thought Cinderella more beautiful than ever, and in a few days married her.
Puss in Boots. There was a miller who left no more estate to the 3 sons he had than his mill, his ass, and his cat. The eldest had the mill, the second the ass, and the youngest nothing but the cat. The poor young fellow was quite comfortless at having so poor a lot. "My brothers," said he, "may get their living handsomely enough by joining their stocks together, but for my part, when I have eaten up my cat, and made me a muff of his skin, I must die of hunger." The cat, who heard all this, but made as if he did not, said to him with a grave and serious air, "Do not thus afflict yourself, my good master. You have nothing else to do but to give me a bag and get a pair of boots made for me, that I may scamper through the dirt and the brambles. And you shall see that you have not so bad a portion in me as you imagine." The cat's master did not build very much upon what he said. He had often seen him play a great many cunning tricks to catch rats and mice, as when he used to hang by the heels, or hide himself in the meal, and make as if he were dead, so that he did not altogether despair of his affording him some help in his miserable condition. When the cat had what he asked for, he booted himself very gallantly, and putting his bag about his neck, he held the strings of it in his 2 forepaws, and went into a warren where was great abundance of rabbits. He put bran and sow thistle into his bag, and stretching out at length, as if he had been dead, he waited for some young rabbits, not yet acquainted with the deceits of the world, to come and rummage his bag for what he had put into it. Scarce was he lain down, but he had what he wanted. A rash and foolish young rabbit jumped into his bag, and Mr. Puss, immediately drawing close the strings, took and killed him without pity. Proud of his prey, he went with it to the palace and asked to speak with his majesty. He was shown upstairs into the king's apartment, and, making a low reverence, said to him, "I have brought you, sir, a rabbit of the warren, which my noble lord the Marquis of Carabas," for that was the title which Puss was pleased to give his master, "has commanded me to present to your majesty from him." "Tell your master," said the king, "that I thank him, and that he does me a great deal of pleasure." Another time he went and hid himself among some standing corn, holding still his bag open, and when a brace of partridges ran into it, he drew the strings, and so caught them both. He went and made a present of these to the king, as he had done before of the rabbit which he took in the warren. The king, in like manner, received the partridges with great pleasure, and ordered him some money for drink. The cat continued for 2 or 3 months thus to carry his majesty, from time to time, game of his master's taking. One day in particular, when he knew for certain that he was to take the air along the riverside, with his daughter, the most beautiful princess in the world, he said to his master, "If you follow my advice, your fortune is made. You have nothing else to do but go and wash yourself in the river. In that part I shall show you, and leave the rest to me." The Marquis of Carabas did what the cat advised him to, without knowing why or wherefore. While he was washing, the king passed by, and the cat began to cry out, "Help, help, my lord Marquis of Carabas is going to be drowned." At this noise the king put his head out of the coach window, and, finding it was the cat who had so often brought him such good game, he commanded his guards to run immediately to the assistance of his lordship the Marquis of Carabas. While they were drawing the poor Marquis out of the river, the cat came up to the coach and told the king that, while his master was washing, there came by some rogues, who went off with his clothes. This cunning cat had hidden them under a great stone. The king immediately commanded the officers of his wardrobe to run and fetch one of his best suits for the Lord Marquis of Carabas. The king caressed him after a very extraordinary manner, and as the fine clothes he had given him extremely set off his good mien, for he was well made and very handsome in his person. The king's daughter took a secret inclination to him, and the Marquis of Carabas had no sooner cast 2 or 3 respectful and somewhat tender glances, but she fell in love with him to distraction. The king would needs have him come into the coach and take part of the airing. The cat, quite overjoyed to see his project begin to succeed, marched on before, and, meeting with some countrymen who were mowing a meadow, he said to them, "Good people, you who are mowing, If you do not tell the king that the meadow you mow belongs to my lord Marquis of Carabas, you shall be chopped as small as herbs for the pot." The king did not fail asking of the mowers to whom the meadow they were mowing belonged. "To my lord Marquis of Carabas," answered they all together, for the cat's threats had made them terribly afraid. "You see, sir," said the Marquis, "this is a meadow which never fails to yield a plentiful harvest every year." The master cat, who went still on before, met with some reapers, and said to them, "Good people, you who are reaping, if you do not tell the king that all this corn belongs to the Marquis of Carabas, you shall be chopped as small as herbs for the pot." The king, who passed by a moment after, would needs know to whom all that corn, which he then saw, did belong. "To my lord Marquis of Carabas," replied the reapers, and the king was very well pleased with it, as well as the Marquis, whom he congratulated thereupon. The master cat, who went always before, said the same words to all he met, and the king was astonished at the vast estates of my lord Marquis of Carabas. Monsieur Puss came at last to a stately castle, the master of which was an ogre, the richest had ever been known, for all the lands which the king had then gone over belonged to this castle. The cat, who had taken care to inform himself who this ogre was, and what he could do, asked to speak with him, saying he could not pass so near his castle without having the honor of paying his respects to him. The ogre received him as civilly as an ogre could do, and made him sit down. "I have been assured," said the cat, "that you have the gift of being able to change yourself into all sorts of creatures you have a mind to. You can, for example, transform yourself into a lion or elephant, and the like." "That is true," answered the ogre very briskly, "and to convince you, you shall see me now become a lion." Puss was so sadly terrified at the sight of a lion so near him that he immediately got into the gutter, not without abundance of trouble and danger, because of his boots, which were of no use at all to him in walking upon the tiles. A little while after, when Puss saw that the ogre had resumed his natural form, he came down, and owned he had been very much frightened. "I have been, moreover, informed," said the cat, "but I know not how to believe it, that you have also the power to take on you the shape of the smallest animals, for example, to change yourself into a rat or a mouse. But I must own to you, I take this to be impossible." "Impossible," cried the ogre, "you shall see that presently." And at the same time he changed himself into a mouse, and began to run about the floor. Puss no sooner perceived this but he fell upon him and ate him up. Meanwhile the king, who saw, as he passed, this fine castle of the ogres, had a mind to go into it. Puss, who heard the noise of his majesty's coach running over the drawbridge, ran out, and said to the king, "Your majesty is welcome to this castle of my lord Marquis of Carabas." "What, my lord Marquis?" cried the king, "and does this castle also belong to you? There can be nothing finer than this court and all the stately buildings which surround it. Let us go into it, if you please." The Marquis gave his hand to the princess, and followed the king, who went first. The king said, "It will be owing to yourself only, my lord Marquis, if you are not my son-in-law." The Marquis, making several low bows, accepted the honor which his majesty conferred upon him, and forthwith, that very same day, married the princess.
Prince. One beautiful day, a young princess went out to take a walk by herself in a wood, and when she came to a cool spring of water, she sat herself down to rest a while. Now she had a golden ball in her hand, which was her favorite plaything, and she was always tossing it up into the air, and catching it again as it fell. After a time she threw it up so high that she missed catching it as it fell, and the ball bounded away, and rolled along on the ground, until at last it fell down into the spring. The princess looked into the spring after her ball, but it was very deep, so deep that she could not see the bottom of it. She began to cry, and said, "Alas! If I could only get my ball again, I would give all my fine clothes and jewels, and everything that I have in the world." Whilst she was speaking, a frog put its head out of the water, and said, "Princess, why do you weep so bitterly?" "Alas," said she, "what can you do for me, you nasty frog? My golden ball has fallen into the spring." The frog said, "I do not want your pearls, and jewels, and fine clothes. But if you will love me, and let me live with you and eat from off your golden plate, and sleep on your bed, I will bring you your ball again." What nonsense, thought the princess, this silly frog is talking. He can never even get out of the spring to visit me, though he may be able to get my ball for me, and therefore I will tell him he shall have what he asks. So she said to the frog, well, if you will bring me my ball, I will do all you ask. Then the frog put his head down and dived deep under the water, and after a little while he came up again, with the ball in his mouth, and threw it on the edge of the spring. As soon as the young princess saw her ball, she ran to pick it up, and she was so overjoyed to have it in her hand again, that she never thought of the frog, but ran home with it as fast as she could. The frog called after her, stay, princess, and take me with you as you said, but she did not stop to hear a word. The next day, just as the princess had sat down to dinner, she heard a strange noise, tap, tap, plash, plash, as if something was coming up the marble staircase, and soon afterwards there was a gentle knock at the door, and a little voice cried out and said, open the door, my princess dear, open the door to thy true love here, and mind the words that thou and I said. By the fountain cool, in the greenwood shade. Then the princess ran to the door and opened it, and there she saw the frog, whom she had quite forgotten. At this sight she was sadly frightened, and shutting the door as fast as she could came back to her seat. The king, her father, seeing that something had frightened her, asked her what was the matter. There is a nasty frog, said she, at the door, that lifted my ball for me out of the spring this morning. I told him that he should live with me here, thinking that he could never get out of the spring. But there he is at the door, and he wants to come in. While she was speaking, the frog knocked again at the door, and said, open the door, my princess dear, open the door to thy true love here, and mind the words that thou and I said. By the fountain cool, in the greenwood shade. Then the king said to the young princess, as you have given your word you must keep it. So go and let him in. She did so, and the frog hopped into the room, and then straight on, tap, tap, plash, plash, from the bottom of the room to the top, till he came up close to the table where the princess sat. Pray lift me upon chair, said he to the princess, and let me sit next to you. As soon as she had done this, the frog said, put your plate nearer to me, that I may eat out of it. This she did, and when he had eaten as much as he could, he said, now I am tired. Carry me upstairs, and put me into your bed. And the princess, though very unwilling, took him up in her hand, and put him upon the pillow of her own bed, where he slept all night long. As soon as it was light the frog jumped up, hopped downstairs, and went out of the house. Now, then, thought the princess, at last he is gone, and I shall be troubled with him no more. But she was mistaken, for when night came again she heard the same tapping at the door, and the frog came once more, and said, open the door, my princess dear, open the door to thy true love here, and mind the words that thou and I said. By the fountain cool, in the greenwood shade. And when the princess opened the door the frog came in, and slept upon her pillow as before, till the morning broke. And the third night he did the same. But when the princess awoke on the following morning she was astonished to see, instead of the frog, a handsome prince, gazing on her with the most beautiful eyes she had ever seen and standing at the head of her bed. He told her that he had been enchanted by a spiteful fairy, who had changed him into a frog, and that he had been fated so to abide till some princess should take him out of the spring, and let him eat from her plate, and sleep upon her bed for 3 nights. You, said the prince, have broken this cruel charm, and now I have nothing to wish for but that you should go with me into my father's kingdom, where I will marry you, and love you as long as you live. The young princess, you may be sure, was not long in saying yes to all this. And as they spoke a brightly colored coach drove up, and behind the coach rode the prince's servant, faithful Heinrich, who had bewailed the misfortunes of his dear master during his enchantment so long and so bitterly, that his heart had well nigh burst. They then took leave of the king, and got into the coach, and all set out, full of joy and merriment, for the prince's kingdom, which they reached safely. And there they lived happily a great many years.
Beanstalk. Once upon a time there lived a poor widow and her son Jack. One day, Jack's mother told him to sell their only cow. Jack went to the market, and on the way he met a man who wanted to buy his cow. Jack asked, "What will you give me in return for my cow?" The man answered, "I will give you 5 magic beans." Jack took the magic beans and gave the man the cow. But when he reached home, Jack's mother was very angry. She said, "You fool! He took away your cow and gave you some beans." She threw the beans out of the window. Jack was very sad and went to sleep without dinner. The next day, when Jack woke up in the morning and looked out of the window, he saw that a huge beanstalk had grown from his magic beans. He climbed up the beanstalk and reached a kingdom in the sky. There lived a giant and his wife. Jack went inside the house and found the giant's wife in the kitchen. Jack said, "Could you please give me something to eat? I am so hungry." The kind wife gave him bread and some milk. While he was eating, the giant came home. The giant was very big and looked very fearsome. Jack was terrified and went and hid inside. The giant cried, "Fee-fee-fo-fum, I smell the blood of an Englishman. Be he alive, or be he dead, I'll grind his bones to make my bread." The wife said, "There is no boy in here." So, the giant ate his food and then went to his room. He took out his sacks of gold coins, counted them, and kept them aside. Then he went to sleep. In the night, Jack crept out of his hiding place, took 1 sack of gold coins, and climbed down the beanstalk. At home, he gave the coins to his mother. His mother was very happy and they lived well for some time. Climbed the beanstalk and went to the giant's house again. Once again, Jack asked the giant's wife for food, but while he was eating, the giant returned. Jack leapt up in fright and went and hid under the bed. The giant cried, "Fee-fi-fo-fum, I smell the blood of an Englishman. Be he alive, or be he dead, I'll grind his bones to make my bread." The wife said, "There is no boy in here." The giant ate his food and went to his room. There, he took out a hen. He shouted, "Lay," and the hen laid a golden egg. When the giant fell asleep, Jack took the hen and climbed down the beanstalk. Jack's mother was very happy with him. After some days, Jack once again climbed the beanstalk and went to the giant's castle. For the 3rd time, Jack met the giant's wife and asked for some food. Once again, the giant's wife gave him bread and milk. But while Jack was eating, the giant came home. "Fee-fee-fo-fum, I smell the blood of an Englishman. Be he alive, or be he dead, I'll grind his bones to make my bread," cried the giant. "Don't be silly. There is no boy in here," said his wife. The giant had a magical harp that could play beautiful songs. While the giant slept, Jack took the harp and was about to leave. Suddenly, the magic harp cried, "Help, master! A boy is stealing me." The giant woke up and saw Jack with the harp. Furious, he ran after Jack. But Jack was too fast for him. He ran down the beanstalk and reached home. The giant followed him down. Jack quickly ran inside his house and fetched an axe. He began to chop the beanstalk. The giant fell and died.
Peter Pan. Once upon a time in London, there lived 3 children. Wendy, John, and Michael were their names. One night, Wendy woke up and saw a strange boy sitting on the floor. He looked cross. "My name is Wendy," she said, and asked the boy, "Who are you, and why do you look so cross?" The boy replied, "I'm Peter Pan. I'm cross because my shadow won't stick to me." "Oh, I can fix that," Wendy said, and sewed Peter's shadow to the tips of his shoes. Peter was now happy. Will you please fly back to Neverland with me in my fairy, Tinkerbell? Peter asked Wendy. You could be our mother and take care of us. Will you teach me how to fly? Wendy asked and Peter nodded. I'll wake John and Michael up. If you teach all of us to fly, we can go to Neverland, Wendy said. It wasn't long before all three children were flying around in the bedroom. Suddenly, with a whoosh, they all flew out of the window and followed the golden arrows that pointed the way to the beautiful land of Neverland. Soon, all of them were flying over the island. Peter told them that the lost boys live with Tinkerbell and him. The mermaids live over there in the lagoon and there are pirates too. Their boss is Captain Hook, Peter said. Pirates? Asked Wendy, a bit frightened. But Michael and John wished to see the pirates right away. Peter said to them, Hook's the meanest pirate ever, but he's frightened of the crocodiles. Peter told them that a crocodile had bitten Hook's hand off years ago. The crocodile liked the taste so much that it followed him, hoping for more. But the crocodile had swallowed his clock and the tick-tock sound warned Hook when the crocodile is nearby. Oh, I'm not sure I want to stay in Neverland after all, Wendy said. Peter then took Wendy, John, and Michael to his house in the woods, through a secret door. Will you be our mother? The lost boys shouted when they saw Wendy. But I'm only a little girl, replied Wendy. Oh, all right, I'll do my best, Wendy said as the lost boys were sad. And so, Wendy tucked the boys into bed that night and told them a story. One day, Peter and the children went exploring around the mermaid's lagoon. All of a sudden, Peter yelled, Pirates! Hide everyone! The boys ran away, while Wendy and Peter hid. Peter saw that the pirates had tied up Tiger Lily, the Indian princess, to a rock. Peter must save her, he shouted in Captain Hook's voice, set the princess free. Captain, you told us to bring her here, one of the pirates yelled. Let her go, Peter roared in Captain's voice again. I, Captain, the pirate said and set the princess free. When Captain Hook found out about this, he knew that Peter had tricked the pirates and was very angry. That night, Wendy told the lost boys a story about three children who left their parents and flew to Neverland. She told them that their mother and father missed them very much. Did they ever go back to them? Asked one of the lost boys. Yes, replied Wendy, they flew home to their mother and father, and everyone was happy like before. This made Wendy, John, and Michael feel homesick and they decided to fly back home the following morning. If you come back with us, I'm sure our parents would look after you, Wendy told the lost boys. Yay! Hooray! Shouted the lost boys in excitement. But Peter and Tinkerbell didn't want to live where grown-ups told children what to do. So, Peter was sad that his friends will leave soon. He asked Tinkerbell to guide all of them to home. Early the next morning, Tinkerbell and the children left Peter's house. Captain Hook's pirates were hiding nearby to capture all the children. They caught them, tied them up, and took them to the pirates' ship. Tinkerbell escaped and flew back to tell Peter what had happened. Who wants to be a pirate? Asked Captain Hook, and the boys shook their heads. Make them walk on the planks, shouted Captain Hook. The boys were afraid, but tried to act brave. Suddenly, all of them heard the tick-tock of the crocodile, and now Captain Hook was afraid. But it was Peter pretending to be a crocodile by producing a similar sound to the crocodile's tick-tock. Peter flew onto the ship and shouted, I've got you now, Hook. Captain Hook jumped up and swung at Peter with his sword, but he missed and it fell right into the sea. Unfortunately, the crocodile was waiting for him in the water, and that was the end of Captain Hook. Peter and Tinkerbell set off for London with Wendy, John, Michael, all the boys. Wendy's mother and father were very happy to see their children again and hugged them. They also said that they would look after all the lost boys. I'm going to stay in Neverland, where I never have to grow up, Peter said. Goodbye, Peter, We'll miss you." Everyone bid him goodbye. So, Peter Pan and Tinker Bell flew back home to Neverland. Moral: in the story, Captain Hook kidnapped the children to turn them into pirates. But he ends up being a treat for the crocodile. Therefore, we must not think evil of someone. Evil doings result in evil consequences.